Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPad Air 4, the iPad Air 2020 model, and see how it holds up in 2023. Now, I will definitely tell you, if you want to pick up some iPads, I would recommend this year, probably including this one. Links will be down in the description. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, the iPad Air 4 was a very interesting iPad that Apple made because it was the first time Apple brought over their newer design that they kind of, recycled, I guess they kind of repurposed from 2018 into the 2020 model. So this was the first time we saw a change, or a bigger change, I would say, in their iPad Air lineup. So from this point on, they've only used this body style, which was amazing. And it was the lack of home button, kind of less bezel design. It's definitely not bezel-less, but this is a timeless design. When I look at that 2018 iPad Pro, Apple knocked it out of the park, and that thing still holds up pretty decently well. I still use mine from time to time. This iPad Air, it was the same type of body styling, almost the exact same thing on the outside. The only thing you were missing was ProMotion. So you had a 10.9-inch Liquid Retina IPS LCD panel on this specific device. It was 1640 by 2360. So it was a very high resolution display, and it was a very good looking display as well. Now, was it perfect? No. Like I mentioned, you were missing something like ProMotion, but I do think for the majority of people out there, you probably are still getting a pretty good panel, and I wouldn't say it's that far off from the M1 iPad Air 5. I think they're almost the same panel. So this thing still looks great. You're getting the front-facing camera as well. Very, very good styling here. On the bottom, you do have USB Type-C, so all those USB-C accessories that you have are applicable here. And that is a really nice touch that you're getting with this type of iPad as well. Now on this side, this is where things start getting a tiny bit complicated. So with the iPad Air 4, you are getting Apple Pencil 2 support. Now this is really good because the next couple of iPads also support Apple Pencil 2. But now that Apple has made the iPad 10th generation, that iPad supports Apple Pencil 1, but it has a USB-C dongle. So I really hope Apple doesn't do anything weird in the future where they require Apple Pencil 1 for certain other iPads. But if you are buying something like an iPad 10 or an iPad Air 4, make sure that the person isn't accidentally selling the wrong iPad. Because if somebody is selling you an iPad 10, but you think it's an iPad Air 4, that specific Apple Pencil is not going to work. I think I've seen that already one time. So just make sure that's not the case. And if you can get the serial number or whatever for that iPad, just make sure it's the appropriate iPad, because this iPad and the iPad Air, iPad 10 look identically the same. Now on the back side, we are getting our standard, flat back on this type of iPad. We're getting a single camera setup on the top left with a microphone cutout, which is great. You're getting that Apple logo right in the center, and that is kind of it. It's a very, very minimalistic looking iPad. And like I said, it looks kind of, you might be getting deja vu because the 2018 iPad Pro, right before this one, 2 years before this one, looks identical to this type of iPad, which I'm totally okay with. So from the outside, that kind of covers it up there. Now in that camera department, this specific iPad is somewhat interesting. So the iPad Air 3 pretty much took the design of the iPad Pro 3rd generation, or the 2nd generation right before that 10.5-inch one. With this iPad, it was taking the same design as the iPad Pro from 2018. So it's funny they just keep taking this iPad Pro design down one. And this camera setup, I think, is very similar to that type of camera. I would say that this camera is somewhat like an iPhone XR camera. So whatever camera you'd use on an iPhone XR is basically the same camera you'd be getting here. So you have a 12 megapixel wide angle camera on the back, and you have a 7 megapixel standard camera on the front. So you have the ability of filming in 4K at 60 on the back, which is awesome. And you're getting 1080p at 60 on the front, which is almost identical to what you'd be getting on the iPhone XR. So you have to think about this. If you have an iPhone XR, right, or newer, you are going to be getting a better camera quality or the same on your iPhone than you are getting on this iPad. If you have an iPhone XS, or you have an iPhone 11 or 12 or 13 or 14 as of this point, you will be getting a better camera quality on your iPad on your iPhone rather than on your iPad. So that's just one thing to kind of remember, but I think this thing is still decent. I personally use my iPad camera whenever I'm, making battery comparisons or something, but even now I don't really do that anymore. But that was really the only time I ever used my iPad camera. But if you're using your iPad as like a student and you're trying to take notes of lectures and whatnot, well, this is pretty good because you can quickly take photos and move on from there. But, it's definitely not one of those cameras where you're going to be replacing your iPhone. But I think it does a decent job at, if your iPhone's charging or if you're not around your iPhone, it's not a bad camera at all. So in terms of the camera side, that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of the actual software longevity, this is another somewhat kind of complicated thing. So this iPad has pretty much the same chipset as the iPhone 12s. So you have to kind of remember that this iPad also came out the same year as the iPhone 12, but right before them. I think this was the first device to bring that A14 chip inside of it. So I don't know per se how long this iPad is going to last, but there are still devices like the A11 Bionic chip iPhone 10 that is still supported with software. So I would say this thing's going to last at least another 2 years. So it's going to last this year, it's going to last next year, and it's probably going to last the year after that. And then maybe it'll be done like around 2026. I think that's when this iPad will get its last update. I mean, you have to look at an iPad like the iPad Air 2. That iPad lasted so long. It lasted so much longer than it should have. It should have probably stopped at iPadOS 14 to be honest. But it got, I think, iPadOS 15, like it lasted for a long period of time. So with this type of iPad, hopefully Apple does the same thing here, and hopefully it just keeps lasting forever, because I honestly think it could, I think it could be supported for a long period of time. But it's one of those things we're just going to have to kind of wait out. So I think in terms of the software experience, it's great. I love iOS. But in terms of the software longevity, I think it's going to be lasting for quite a bit of time as well. So that covers it up there as well. Now in the performance side, this iPad has that Apple A14 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 gigabytes of RAM. There was only ever basically 2 models of this iPad, but they both had 4 gigabytes of RAM inside of it. And I think the thing I will tell you about this iPad is that it's a great performing device. You have to think about it with the iPhone 12. The iPhone 12 is very similar to something like an iPhone 13, which in and of itself is very similar to the iPhone 14. Now, I'm not saying the iPhone 12 is the same performance as the iPhone 14, but that chipset is still very powerful. In fact, whenever I pick up my iPhone 11 or even my iPhone XR, I'm still shocked by how fast that phone kind of is. And with an iPad Air 4, this is no exception. This is a very fast iPad that can easily still rip through tons of things that you're trying to, perform or whatever you're trying to do basically. So if you're doing light applications, you're going to be fine. If you're doing medium applications like somewhat light video editing, or you're going through and playing some, light games or even heavy intensive games, those things are going to be fine. But even if you're doing heavy intensive video editing, if you're trying to replace like a MacBook overall, if your applications are supported on this device, you're probably going to have a pretty decent time. And that is something that is so beautiful about iPads. It's because they don't require like a ton of resources or a ton of power. You can have a really good performing time with an iPad, even if it's not the most powerful thing. In fact, I picked up an iPad 9 like last year, and I still mess around with my iPad 9 sometimes. And even that one with that A13 Bionic is still very fast. And this one has a newer chipset than that one. So I think something like the iPad Air 4 is still in a very good spot from the performance side. And that is how I kind of think with this specific iPad. I think the iPad Air 4 is still a very good iPad for sure. It performs very well. It just has a bunch of power. And I think it's one of those iPads I look at and I'm very happy with. It probably wouldn't be the first iPad I would recommend buying immediately. But if you're in the market and if you are on a budget, this is a decent option. And I probably couldn't, I definitely wouldn't be the last iPad I'd recommend. This is a very solid, stable iPad that you can definitely, buy and use for many years from now. So in terms of that, kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.